cafe opened then, letting in a blast of frigid air from outside, where the temperature hovered at a relatively balmy 33 degrees. Or likely less than that now that the gray, moody daylight was eking away into the winter dark, and the coming sunset at 3:15. Kate glanced up, expecting the usual local in typical winter clothes. But the man who sauntered in from the cold was more like a mountain. She sat at attention, unable to help herself, her body responding unconsciously to the authority the man exuded, the way other men, and the many deadly wild animals who roamed these islands, threw off scent. And she deeply loathed herself for the silly, embarrassingly feminine part of her that wanted to flutter about, straightening her blue uniform. She refrained. The man before her was dressed for the cold and the coming dark, which should have made him look bulky and misshapen, but it didn't, because all his gear was very clearly tactical. He was big. Very big. She put him at about 6'4", and that wasn't taking into account the width of his shoulders or the way he held himself, as if he fully expected anyone looking at him to either cower in fear or applaud. Possibly both. Kate did neither. It was December on a steep, rugged island made from the top of a submerged mountain and covered in dense evergreen trees, perched there in the treacherous northern Pacific with glaciers all around, on one of the most beautiful, if inhospitable, parts of the world. There were only about 150 or so year-round residents of this particular village, and Kate was the only person in the cafe besides the distinctly unfriendly owner, who had provided her a cup of coffee without comment, then disappeared into the kitchen. Meaning she was, for all intents and purposes, alone with a man who made her feel as instantly on edge as she would if she'd come face to face with a grizzly. Kate didn't speak as she eyed the new arrival. She'd joined the troopers after college and had been on the job ever since, helping her fellow Alaskans in all parts of this great state. And sometimes providing that help had involved finding herself in all kinds of questionable situations. The man standing before her radiated power, but Kate knew a thing or two about it herself. She watched, expressionless, as he stuffed his hat and gloves in the arm of his jacket, like a normal person when he wasn't, then hung it up on one of the hooks near the door. All with what seemed to Kate entirely too much languid indifference for a man who was clearly well aware he was nothing less than a loaded weapon. He looked around the cafe as if he expected to see a crowd on this dreary, cold Friday afternoon in the darkest stretch of the year. Then he finally looked straight at Kate. For a moment, she felt wildly, bizarrely dizzy, as if the chair she was in had started to spin. She went to sit down, then realized three things, one on top of the next. 1, she was already sitting down. 2, the man might have made a big show of looking around, but he'd taken in every single detail about her before he'd fully crossed the threshold. She knew it. She could tell. And 3, the man in front of her wasn't only big and powerful and incredibly dangerous if the file on him was even partially correct. He was also beautiful. Shockingly, astonishingly, absurdly beautiful. In a way that struck her as too masculine, too physical, and too carnal all at once. He had thick black hair that didn't look the least bit military, and that he made no attempt to smooth now that he'd pulled his hat off. His eyebrows were arched and distinctly wicked. His eyes were as dark as strong coffee. His mouth was implausibly distracting, and his cheekbones were like weapons. He looked the way Kate imagined a Hawaiian god might. Which was a fanciful notion that she couldn't believe she'd just entertained about a person of interest in a recurring series of questionable events. His gaze was locked to hers, and she wondered if people mistook all that inarguable male beauty